What's up, Reed?
How are you, Quinn? As you look at the games that you played and the way that this team has been playing, what's been the message just to kind of stay focused on how you've been playing and carry it forward?
I think just that, and focused on the right things. It means focused on, defending the ball, being in situations where we're aggressive and prepared to help keep the ball out of the paint, and then finishing possessions. I think that anchor defensively, and to the extent that can help fuel some of our offense, we want to keep running. That those running habits are something that I think will continue to evolve. We're not there, but I think a willingness and an emphasis on continuing to pass the ball and generate offense out and take care of it.
I know you mentioned earlier this week about the offensive rebounding. Not only as a team, but are there specific players that you might have crashed more out of how do you kind of account for that?
It's an interesting philosophical question. I think what you've seen, you can look at the analytics, they show it. I know a number of years ago, we decided in Utah to crash. And you wonder, just a go guy, get back guy, where you are on the floor, and where the majority of the rebounds come, and second spectrum analysis. And I think every team is different. In that situation, it didn't matter if we had one guy back or if four guys were back. If Rudy Gobert wasn't back, it wasn't happening. So I think the real math comes into how many opportunities are you limiting a team to play in transition offensively by getting an offensive board. So if you can offensive rebound and score, that's another opportunity to set your defense. It's one less time that you have to be back in transition, and you start to do the math on that. And again, every team's different. There are teams that have more success in transition defense, maybe more size, more defenders across the board. And then you get into, do you want to crash on threes? Do you want to crash on everything? One of the issues with crashing and going to the glass is if it is a habit and you have a player drive, particularly on some of those plays where the guy that drives may fall down, you're going to give up something the other end, more than likely. But I think the thing you have to get comfortable with is they're going to score. There's going to be some easy baskets that you give up, and just the risk reward of the whole thing. And again, team dependent, but you can look at it from a mathematical standpoint, and then you can look at it from a personnel standpoint, and everybody kind of finds where they are in the middle. But clearly, it's not. There isn't as strong a correlation between being effective crashing and not being good in transition defense. Those things are not as counterintuitive as you think they are.
Coach, with Amiga coming back from injury, then obviously playing with you guys for a couple of games, then having to step back again, then being available. How do you kind of see his chemistry building with this team?
Yeah, I think what we saw early was a real effort on his part to fit in, and kind of finding his way, and other guys getting a feel for him. We've gone through this so many times, where we're integrated in another player. In some respects, it's almost easier to throw 5 new guys in there together. The minute you start to develop a chemistry with a group, and then you inject another group, and you inject another group, it's, those things all play into it. And it's something you watch, and he's obviously, we want him out there. So we'll figure it out, and guys will figure it out, and he'll figure it out. And, you kind of just know that it may not be, there's going to be an adjustment period and all that, but we want to go through it.
Quinn, speaking of chemistry, last game, Presser, you talked about the team and the buy-in, the being unselfish. there were a couple of instances that stood out. One time Jalen penetrated and could have easily shot the ball, but opted to kick the ball out to the heel for a wide open three. Another instance, Dyson penetrated and could have got his shot, but then he kicks it out to Jalen. When you see those moments, do you focus a little bit more and hit on it to remind the guys that, hey, when you play for one another, it eventually comes back to you?
I think it's one of those kind of basketball truths, because it really does happen. You know, when you're willing, the term I like that I want to see from our team is not just to be unselfish, but for us to be obviously unselfish. If you can remember those plays and actually, describe them, that's what we want. And even at the expense sometimes of, somebody kicks it out and they miss a three and you're sitting there going, why didn't he dunk that? You're going to get some of that, but I think it's representative of guys trying to make each other better. And you see it in those situations, but it also applies, when you're on the weak side and someone drives, you're there for them because that's an unselfish play. And, giving yourself up in a screening situation, it manifests itself so many ways. The most visible ones are what you just described that relate to shots and passing, but I think it really permeates the whole game.
Kind of going off of that, you've talked about this, just simplifying things and simplifying the offense and having to add 7 new players, and talking with some of the guys, they've mentioned that, saying running less sets, but running more actions off of those sets. Is that something, I'm curious, that you would normally do throughout a season, or as a season gets towards 20 games left in the regular season, do you usually simplify things, or can you explain that a little bit of why that's
sometimes
challenge?
you go wide
Yeah.
to get more narrow and more efficient. The thing that can't be lost in the whole thing is it may be simplifying on a relative basis, but when you have 10 things and then no one knows any of them, you probably get to pick 3 of them and teach them. So that said, what I'm really referring to is looking at, like Job, for example, is better than anybody we've had at sealing, after a switch. He rolls, it may not be a rim roll for a dunk, but he steals. So we haven't been great at finding him in those situations. And when we have seen him, we haven't always been able to deliver the ball. So that's a play or a concept within a play that we have to work on. And so that's new, but the play itself may not be new. So it can fit together a lot of different ways, but the key thing for me on that is to try to put our guys in positions where they can be successful, and then positions where they can be instinctive. And for us, usually over the course of the season, you may understand a play, but do you understand it against a team that switches like Will and I? Do you understand it when a team goes over on a screen, when they go under on a screen, all the nuances that come in to reading a coverage, and usually the simplification helps with respect to that.
Well, would you put Jonathan in that same type of category in terms of the screening, the physicality that he brings? We've seen a little bit of it, but when he sets a screen and seals that guy, it's different.
Yeah, well, his strength allows him to roll effectively, kind of bust through. What we've seen in this league is just it's become such a physical league, and it varies a little bit game to game, but there's such a premium on physical strength. It's just there. I mean, you look at and foul. The best defensive teams foul the most. So, I'm not saying anything that you guys can't look up, and usually that means that you're physical. And being physical, you're gonna foul at times. So, JK is a physical player, and the physicality, as you mentioned, Bob, that's a physical play when you can literally seal your guy and keep him on your back. And breaking through a switching situation, driving to the basket and taking contact, that's why he's getting to the foul line. So we haven't had that. So trying to figure out ways within what we're doing to try to maybe put him in a situation where we can take advantage of that. That's kind of the process that we're going through.
Thanks, Coach.